Hello everyone! I wanted to try to show off a few other top player opinions on weapons more this year, and I think it would be kind of interesting. This is one from Soroy. Apologize if I'm saying their name wrong, but this is one of the main TOs for Area Cup. They share some of their takes and other information on the game here, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. They have a few other graphs showcasing how well people are doing in the tournaments, and it's a great way to keep up to date with a good portion of the Japanese scene. Anyway, they made this list today, zones only, based on Area Cup results in version 10.1. Weapons with consistent results, strong impact, and top placements by multiple players are placed in higher tiers. Tiers up to A are ordered, so that's up to here, and D tier consists of weapons that I've never seen, or basically haven't been seen much in Area Cups. So, this is the list they made. And again, it's mostly just based off the results of Area Cups themselves, and it's a good way to take a look at it, since these are results from one main tournament series, and that's mostly what I feel is important for the Japanese scene here. So we can take a look at a lot of weapons here. I basically wanted to go over this and give my thoughts on it, and the overall ranking, and where I think the meta is going. And if you haven't kept up with Area Cups, some of the weapons here might jump out at you a little bit, which, yeah, there's definitely a few newcomers here. I do eventually want to do a video on the recent bow results that have happened. So for those who've been out of the loop, both Tri-Stringer and Wellstring have recently won Area Cups, the Tri-Stringer being the more primary used one of the two, and both times with the same comp of S-Blast, Vanilla 96, and Red Doppeldualies. I have a lot to say about that comp because I find it incredibly interesting, possibly the most interesting comp in the entire game. And I'd like to talk about it sometime, but it's going to be later in a main channel video, so there'll be a bit of a wait for that. For now, I'll still try to talk a little bit about the weapons as they come up. And also, I want to say, I guess for the most part, I want to talk about stuff A tier or higher. There's a few things that I think are worth talking about first, though. First off is Zuka. Zuka might seem a bit random to bring up here, but I want to point out is there's actually nothing in A tier or higher that has Zuka. Even weapons like Shot or the new mini-spotting that saw use just 6 months ago are already dropping quite considerably far. I think that Zuka's nerfs have honestly been a lot harsher than people have realized, and it's nowhere near as consistent as it used to be. It is an extremely inconsistent special, and I just don't really think it's super worth it, and it's hit a lot of Zuka weapons pretty hard. This is a pretty good accurate representation of that, though. You can really see that there's basically nothing with Zuka higher up on this list. The second thing I want to talk about is what I think will change more often in this list going into the future. There's obviously a few weapons here that I could see doing better or have trended upward that I plan to talk about, but there is one big overall category that I want to mention, and that is stamp weapons. Most of the weapons on this list that I do think are possibly ranked a little bit low are all stamp weapons, things like Inkbrush Nouveau, Vanilla Wellstring, or Wiper, for instance. We've been starting to see more people take advantage of the hammer buff, and just talk about how good hammer has been since the recent changes, so I wouldn't be surprised if hammer weapons as a whole tend to trend upward. We do see a good amount of vanilla mini-spiraling, but that was also something we saw even before the buffs happened. So I just feel it's worth mentioning that that's kind of one place where I could see a lot of weapons jumping up in the future. That said, besides that, I don't have much to say about B tier or lower weapons here. Obviously, Vanilla Wellstring is very new, happening just today, and if the same bow team plays future Area Cups, I could see Wellstring climbing higher, since it's one of the weapons that benefits from the stamp buff. Let's start with A tier. At the bottom of A tier is Splatana Stamper, which might seem like a really low placement. But as far as I know, Stamper for a while hasn't actually won an Area Cup. Now Narisho, the main player who uses Stamper, has won an Area Cup, but he switched to S-Blast in Grand Finals, the tournament he did win on it. Stamper has been trending downward a while in terms of results, and while a lot of people still find it a very good weapon, it does require a lot of work. And this is one of the places where we've really seen it reflected. This is how low it really does seem to be results-wise, under other weapons like Nautilus that you wouldn't expect, and I think that's honestly pretty fair with how it's performing lately. Splattershot Pros could all be talked about a little bit. I feel like Forge has been the main winner of the three, but all of them see some amount of competitive use, which is pretty cool, of course. I think Splattershot Pro is still a solid weapon, but probably not as high as people originally intended it to be. It's really fine, I don't really have any big downsides for it, I just think other supports have become a little more interesting. We've seen a little bit more of Tri-Slosher Nouveau recently. In particular, it had a very big Area Cup run with E-Leader, which I find kind of interesting. It wasn't used every single time, but it was used quite a lot, and its ability to be anti-rushdown was pretty solid, and it seemed like the lower cooler output was pretty okay. Outside of that on this list, and last weapon I really have to talk about for this tier is Dooley. Dooley has been trending downward for quite a bit. It is very popular in the Western scene, and probably the main support we see over there. I think that makes a little bit more sense in an all-mode setting. But in zones only, the weapon has trended down as other supports take over its spot in popularity. In particular, mini-spottings have been continuing to go up. In S tier, we have the brand new Vanilla 96, or, I mean, kinda new. Vacuum buff is still pretty recent, and that's a big factor to this. 96 gets a lot of vacuum. Some of the data from the same person seems to say that it took around, I think, 43 to 45 seconds to get one vacuum to the next throughout these games, which is very fast for special output these days. And that can carry a lot of momentum, even if the special itself is, like, you know, solid but not amazing. Even if it was in that spot, just such a high output of a special that can be difficult to deal with can be a great way for teams to work around it. Bow being up here is obviously a lot of the new trends. Bow does a very good job at painting the map effectively, and it just has a lot of range and ability to pressure over corners. As we're going to see as we get higher up, I believe AoE is becoming more and more important as this meta progresses. It might be the overall trend. I'm seeing a lot more good comps lately that tend to have two options for AoE. Obviously, there's the main duo of S-Blast and Slosher, but this is one interesting way that I see to work around it. Tri-Stringer also has the ability to pressure over corners and does enough chip damage to work off a lot of these weapons. So it's one case where I think it is actually finding a lot more value for those reasons. It's still very specific to build a comp around it, and that will have to wait for the main channel video where I get to look into the comp in more detail. But yeah, I think this is a fair spot for it. E-Leader is also ranked pretty highly, and honestly has potential to climb more in general. It's won a few more events, and most notably did win the tournament that I mentioned earlier alongside the whole Tri-Slosher thing. It was mostly used with Forge, Tri, and Slosher, though the comps did change a little bit since it was two bucket players on the same team. E-Leader has continued to climb in its results, and where a lot of people thought its consistency might fall off, it only seems to be climbing higher. E-Leader comps also seem to be a little bit more varied rather than just using it with the standard comps that Pencil does. So I'm really curious to see if this will be a case where it trends further upward. The most recent run it had was really dominant, but we still have to see if that'll be replicated as teams get used to adjusting to these weapons. Besides that is the mini Splowlings. Vanilla Mini has benefited a lot from the stamp buff, of course, and both Burst and Stamp have good synergy with each other for chip damage and pressuring behind corners. Vanilla Mini is in general a pretty aggressive support just because of the toolkit, and I think that's pretty useful for it. I haven't seen Zinc Mini as much, in fact I'm kind of surprised it's ranked this highly, but it must overall throughout the course of this patch still have been used quite a bit. Mint Decapitator's definitely dropped off a little bit, but it's still very good. I think there's just a bit more options for counterplay against this weapon than it might originally seem. It's very hard to find value with it, and the more time goes on, the more difficult the weapon seems. There's a few people able to get good results with it, notably Toto in Japan, but it's still pretty rare. And in the West, it's pretty much the same thing. We mostly just have Omega getting consistent results over here with it, so I suppose it's not that surprising. I think that Bubble is also suffering from a few more counters to it. In particular, I don't think the Rise of Stamp is doing any favors for it, since that's one special that just deals with Bubble very well. Red Doppeldooley has been definitely getting a lot more popular, but recently people have been figuring out different comps that you can use to be able to keep it as a more consistent option on other maps, which I think is really interesting. I'm kind of curious if it's also a consistent option you could run with Leader, but it's definitely working with bow stuff as well. Of course, it's also very popular on the usual short-range maps like Flounder and Urchin. So honestly, there might be more merit to keeping Dapple as a staple support as time goes on. It's something I might have Moonlight experiment with as well, but we'll see. Outside of that is the main four weapons that you might expect. Splash is doing a lot better than initially anticipated and still sees quite high usage rate. Though if I have to be honest, I think this might be one that's inflated. I'm really just not sure if Splash is actually this good, and no one really seems to think it's that high from where I've looked. I mean, there might be some people who give a high opinion of it, but personally I feel like other stuff is just trending upward that does its job better, or just has better trends going on. But Splash is still a pretty consistent weapon. It stood the test of time, and yeah, I could definitely see it being here. Pencil dropping off a little bit is also not too surprising, as other anchors have given it more competition recently. Both Leader and Bow have been doing a good job, and even a little bit of Rapid Pro, so it's nice to see Pencil getting some competition. If it does end up getting a small nerf in a future patch, I could really see other weapons taking it over, considering other anchors are already really close to it right now, which hasn't been seen in a while. Besides that, it's the main duo you might expect at the top. S-Blast and Slosher have absolutely busted specials on their kits and really good AoE, and AoE has become very important. I feel these weapons are just more consistent at doing high damage and being able to get away with it. Personally, these are kind of the two weapons I hope to see some nerfs in the future too. But yeah, that's my early thoughts on this list and kind of just what I think of it. Obviously, this is an opinion that is not my own and is, based in results. So I think overall the list is very accurate, and it's cool to see some, you know, a list based off the data of the specific tournament. I'm curious how things will change in the future, but I hope that you found this list interesting. Be sure to go check out Soroy. I will have their link in the description below. Thanks for watching.